Hey everyone. Today I'd like to invite you to visit a beautiful city with me. Let's have a little trip to Paris. I found this while I spent a weekend there and I thought it's so cute. You can see the Eiffel Tower in the background, the Arc de Triomphe there in the middle, and a little cat right there in the center. But what I'd like to have a look at today with you is something beneath the street level. I thought we could have a look at how people in Paris get around. So for one, at the underground system. And before that, we could have a look at how to actually get to Paris. So you might remember this map that we've seen before when we looked at the sort of luxury creative papers that I bought in summer. And I remember that there was something about Paris in there. And this is from 1922. And I noticed that you have these red lines here along some of the streets. And it turns out that these are the underground lines. And you know, living in a city that opened its first underground in 1978, I thought that was really, really astonishing. So we're going to have a look at that in a moment. But the other thing that I thought was also interesting, I've mentioned this before, I went to visit the Musée d'Orsay, and it's a really beautiful museum that's located inside a former train station. So it's here, Gare du d'Orsay. So I thought, let's have a look at how to actually get to Paris if you don't fly there, but rather take the train. We can find here a number of train stations. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and with the Gare d'Orsay we have 7. Like I said, this isn't a train station anymore, so if we cross this one out, we still have 6 train stations. And we could start with the one up here, the Gare du Nord. It actually looks quite impressive. It's a really, really big building. I didn't know this, but this is actually one of the busiest stations in Europe and is currently being expanded for the Olympic Games in 2024, so it's going to be even bigger. Gare du Nord, you already have it in the name. It connects Paris towards the north. So the trains that are leaving from here, of course, have a lot of commuters come in, so just from outside the city. But this is also where you would leave with the Eurostar if you wanted to go to London. So that starts from here. You can also go to Brussels, to Amsterdam, to some cities in northern Germany, which of course all aren't too far away. geographically speaking. Next to it we have the much smaller Gare de l'Est. So here it looks like the train lines going in the same direction, but we already have it in the name. This one then diverges towards the east rather than the north. Originally, when it was built in the middle of the 19th century, it was called Embarcadère de Strasbourg. So Strasbourg, of course, being in the Alsace, you already get an idea of where the trains would go to. Today, this is also where the night trains arrive. There's a night train to Moscow via Berlin, and there's also a pretty new night train from Vienna that I hope I get to take maybe next year. This year it was announced a bit too late for me, but I'm really excited about that. It takes 14 hours, so it's quite a journey, but I do like night trains. Right, let's move this a little further up. The next station would be down here between the Boulevard Diderot and the Quai de la Râpée along the Seine. If we follow the Rue de Lyon, we get to Place de la Bastille. We have the Gare de Lyon here. And again, we have the destination in its name. It leaves towards the south and goes to Lyon, which is a beautiful city too if you ever get to visit it. And the Gare de Lyon has a very famous tower. It's quite a beautiful building, and a famous restaurant next to the tower called Le Train Bleu, the Blue Train, with a really beautiful decoration inside. From here, like I said, you can go south to Lyon, but also further towards Spain, to Barcelona, or in the other direction towards Italy, to Milano, Venice, via Switzerland. And I just saw there's actually another small train station, Gare de Vincennes. I did not look this one up, so this one's new to me too. But it's probably related here to the Gare de Lyon. I don't think it was particularly important since it didn't turn up in my lists. If we cross the Seine, we get to the Quai d'Austerlitz, which initially had another name, but there's quite a lot of places in Paris that are named after things that happened during Napoleon's reign. There's, for example, also an underground station called the Wagram, which really surprised me. That's in Lower Austria, so not far from Vienna. Austerlitz is also more in my corner of Europe rather than in France. And we have here the Gare d'Austerlitz. You can see just with the Gare de Lyon quite a lot of space taken up by these train stations. And basically, just as with the other train stations, this one too is from the middle of the 19th century originally. But I think it's fair to say that all of them got rebuilt quite quickly because they turned out too small. So this one was rebuilt in 1870. And then from 1900 to 1937, which is exactly when this map was created in 1922, it was not a terminal station anymore, but it rather continued here along the quay of the Seine, past the Notre Dame. It's quite a beautiful scenic route. Across from the Palais du Louvre, where you had the Ministry of Finances at the time. Here towards the Gare d'Orsay. The reason for that was that in 1900 you had the World Fair in Paris, and they tried to get people sort of further towards the center than with these terminal stations. So they opened the Gare d'Orsay. Again, it was only used until 1837, and today the Gare d'Austerlitz is again a terminal station. Today, this one is, I think, the only one of the train stations in Paris that's not running at capacity. So it's currently not the most important train station, but there's probably going to be new connections taking you here. Alright. So we've been able to go north, to go east and south. And now here we have the Gare Montparnasse. It's also one of the smaller stations, space-wise. And this one's important if you're coming, for example, from the Atlantic coast, so from the west. And it also connects you to the Bretagne, which is a place I hope to revisit soon. We got to visit a crêperie with galette and crêpes from the Bretagne, and it was so delicious. Really enjoyed this. Alright, and then the last one would be here in the north, so we are crossing the Seine again to Gare Saint-Lazare. And we have 3 main track lines leading out of the station, again north and somewhat westwards. This is the second largest station, and given quite important for commuters, and it connects to the Normandy. Alright, so let's go through them again. We have Gare Saint-Lazare, Gare du Nord, Gare de l'Est, Gare de Lyon, Gare d'Austerlitz, and Gare Montparnasse. So, and like I said, one of the really fascinating parts of this map for me was just the extent of the underground lines. In Vienna, I've already mentioned that the first underground line opened in 1978, and it was 4 whole stations. It's been extended quite often since then, but that's, small beginnings. So this is quite amazing. The reason that there's an underground is actually the same reason as to why there's the Gare d'Orsay at the time. It was built for the World Fair in 1900. And people noticed that you needed some way to move around inside of the city to get to the different places, and the system they had before simply wasn't enough. one of the systems they had was the Petite Ceinture, or Chemin de Fer de Petite Ceinture, as it was called. And I think that we can see this here in the outskirts. It's a line that connects the different train stations with one another and follows part of the city wall at the time. This is one of the later city walls in Paris. It's by Thiers, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. And it runs around the city. You can also see it here. And it's been torn down since. It was torn down between the First and the Second World War. Today you have, as you can already see here, you have some boulevards running along it, like Boulevard Victor, Boulevard Lefebvre, etc. And there should be another one today that's running outside. We can see the remains of this city wall if we're looking at a map of today's underground line. We have a lightly different shade here. The inner zone, which would be Paris, and then we have an outer zone, which is sort of more cream colored rather than white. And here, where you move from the outer towards the inner zone, you have the Porte Dorée, Porte Charenton, Porte Ivry, Porte Choisy, Porte Italie. So these are all of the different ports or portals, gates I guess you would say, they would allow you to move into the city. And it pretty much goes all the way around. Here we have Porte Auteuil, Porte Maillot, Porte d'Asnières, Magritte Longue, Porte Clignancourt, Porte La Chapelle, etc., etc. So this is where this old city wall would have been. If we compare the two maps, we can see here the Gare d'Austerlitz and Gare de Lyon, which we would have here and here. And then we have a couple of lines across, and then here we would have the city wall. So I'm guessing that in this case, the way that the underground crosses the Seine does not correspond to the bridges, but we get an idea of the distance from the two train stations to the city wall, which I think you can see corresponds quite well. The other thing that's quite fascinating is that a lot of these underground lines follow the outline of the streets, and this is something I didn't expect at all. We can't see it on today's map, but it becomes really evident on this older map. If we're following the line 1, for example, we're just starting here with the Louvre. You can see you have Rue du Rivoli. Then here we're turning at the Place de la Concorde. It follows right under the Avenue des Champs-Élysées, along the Place de l'Étoile, and up Avenue de la Grande Armée. Down here, this should be line 2, if I remember correctly. We follow Avenue Bougeot. Here from the Place Victor Hugo, we turn Avenue Victor Hugo, Place de l'Étoile. From there, it's kind of difficult to see where line 2 goes. Let's see. Victor Hugo turns north. But either way, what I'm trying to tell you is that it really follows every corner of the different boulevards. You can see this here. And the way a lot of these underground lines were constructed is that the streets were actually opened up to construct them. In other cities, especially today, here in Vienna, for example, we currently have the constructions for the new underground line for the U5. And you do have these big construction sites where the new stations are going to be. But other than that, everything is happening underground. At the time in Paris, this was not possible. I do think that they have planned it to build it similar to the way that they built it in London, but unfortunately it wasn't doable because of the way that the ground is laid in Paris. So they opened up a lot of these streets to create the underground lines. I imagine it must have been a little tedious to get around back then. So let's have another look here. Of course, they've since been extended, but we still have, for example, here with line 1, starting today from La Défense. Back then, I think the terminal station was Port-Maillot. It follows down to Champs-Élysées, Concorde, Tuileries, Palais Royal, Musée du Louvre, Louvre et Rivoli. These two stations, by the way, changed their names once the entrance to the Louvre was moved somewhere else. Now that you have the pyramid inside the Louvre, you can get out here to visit it rather than here at Louvre Rivoli. We have Hôtel de Ville, Saint-Paul, down to Gare de Lyon, and then further out to Château de Vincennes. So let's see if we can follow this here in the older map. We started Porte de Neuilly. Right, okay, so it was a bit further out. It was not Port-Maillot, it was Pont de Neuilly. It was called Porte de Neuilly. Okay. So we get to Place de l'Étoile. Should probably be here. Charles de Gaulle Étoile. Then Champs-Élysées. Rue de Rivoli. To Hôtel de Ville. Bastille. From there to Gare de Lyon. And then out to Place de la Nation. It's the same here, Gare de Lyon, and then out to Rue Diderot, Nation, and Château de Vincennes. Interestingly, line 1 is also one of the underground lines that run automatically today, so you don't have anyone in the seat at the front. It's all automatic. And if I remember this correctly, it's been automatic for about 20 years, so quite a long time. Right, let's try another line, maybe line 2 from Porte Dauphine. So we have Porte Dauphine right here, following Avenue Bugeaud, Victor Hugo. Same way here, Charles de Gaulle Étoile, which would be this part. And then here it looks like it's going straight up to Rome and Place de Clichy, Blanche, Pigalle, Anvers, and past the Gare du Nord, so a little north of the Gare du Nord. So this should be here, Boulevard de Courcelles, the Gare de Lazare here. So we are passing this now, Place de Clichy. And from there we're turning. And we're crossing north of the Gare du Nord. Alright. So interestingly, 1 and 2 are actually some of the first lines that were built. There were 2 different companies that built these underground lines. One was called the Compagnie du Chemin de Fer Métropolitain de Paris, which I guess is also where the name metro comes from. And the other one is the Société du Chemin de Fer Électrique Souterrain Nord-Sud de Paris. So that's quite a mouthful. It was eventually shortened to Nord-Sud, so North-South. And one of the lines they built is, I think it was line 12. Let's see where we have that. From Mairie d'Issy, Porte Versailles, Notre-Dame-de-Champs, towards Rennes, Rue du Bac, Severino, and Assemblée Nationale. Here they cross the Seine to Concorde, Madeleine. We get to Haussmann Saint-Lazare, Notre-Dame de Lorette. This is actually where I had to change. I think we tried to get on the line 4, but it was closed. So we took the 12 to Notre-Dame de Lorette, got out, walked across to Le Pelletier, and then got on line. I think it should be 7. And this is something that I think in Vienna would be, it would take a while. These stations from one to the next line are close enough together, but oftentimes, say, if I wanted to walk from the U4 to the U1, it would be a fair way. In Paris, this was literally 2 corners. It was really, really closely together. And that's also something that's really typical for the Paris network. You often only have about 500 meters between 2 stations, so it's really easy to just walk from one place to the next. Right, but we wanted to follow the line 12. So north to Saint-Georges, Pigalle, Abbesse, Lamarque, Conlincourt. Then here towards Marque du Poissonnière, Marx d'Ormoy, and Front Populaire. So let's see if we can find it on here. So maybe it's easiest to start here. Concorde to Assemblée Nationale. It's right next to the Musée d'Orsay. So maybe it will be this one. Right next to it you have another line crossing. Right, Place de la Concorde. So it's this one here. Following the Boulevard Saint-Germain. Boulevard Raspail. Here passe Montparnasse. Place d'Enfer, Rocheret. I hope this is still the right line. I think we're a little too far. D'Enfer Rocheret is here on 2 different lines. These are B and 4. So you went a little too far. But of course, maybe this is one of the lines that got extended later. Maybe we're turning south. Place de Rennes. Et Severino rue de Bac and Rennes. Right, but I can't quite see where else this line would go, so maybe it's been changed a little since then. But that's all right. I have to say, this is probably not the most exciting thing for most people when you go on vacation to another city. But for me, experiencing the underground system of another place is really interesting. It's something that you don't pay a lot of attention to in the city where you live. You kind of just run through the tunnels on autopilot because you know where you're going and where to turn. You don't really look at your surroundings anymore. But then here in Paris, suddenly everything looks different. With the white tiles and the stations, which are a completely different shape. The tunnels feel a little smaller. The entrances, of course, look completely different. And I thought it was really fascinating. Kind of a beautiful experience to see something so mundane, so everyday become interesting again. And of course, the map alone with its 16 lines is quite intimidating to me. So I hope I get to go back soon and check out more of the lines. While my friends probably wait for me in a cafe with a nice croissant or some more crepe until I'm done exploring the underground. Alright, so I think we're gonna fold this back up now. Paris, lecture confort. So I'll see you again soon. Good night.